You're watching Ready Set Drone, and today we have the brand new TinyHawk 3 HD from EMAX. If you've flown a TinyHawk before, you know what I'm talking about, and if you haven't, you're gonna want to, so stay tuned. So for a lot of people who got started flying FPV early, TinyHawks were the way to learn. They're considered tiny whoops, they're ducted props, they're indoors, they're 1S, they're very small, very safe, very easy to fly, no need to register or anything like that. And the analog version of those have been a staple with many FPV flyers for indoor flying, as well as just learning and teaching people how to fly a FPV quad. Well, EMAX has had a long history with the TinyHawk, and now they have the brand new TinyHawk 3, which is the updated version. And what they've done differently, aside from a few tweaks and modifications, is they have included HD0, which is a HD protocol. And while it still has the same kind of sparklies and breakups that analog can have, it actually looks a lot better and more high definition than analog ever did. So it's a step forward. It's not digital, really. It's not the same kind of digital as you have with DJI or Walk Snail or some of these other digital protocols, but it is a step up from the analog. And in a quad this size, it makes a big difference because you can see a lot more through it. It doesn't have any sort of onboard recording. None of the TinyHawks do, but you can record in the goggles. And speaking of goggles, these are the new Transporter 2 goggles, which are compatible with HD0. So they're very similar to other Transporter goggles. You can pull the screen off the front, which is really nice. It's magnetic and it just kind of sticks on there. It has the ability to stretch out so you get a little bit better visuals with your eyes. You can get it a little further away from your eyes by stretching it out like this. It makes the vision a lot better. And again, HD0 compatible versus analog compatible, which the old Transporter goggles were. Still kind of cheap and inexpensively made, but that's the whole point of this whole kit. This whole kit is designed to be affordable so that anyone who's getting into flying FPV can buy the kit and get going right away. So we've got these, we've got this, we've got the battery charger that allows you to charge the 1S and 2S batteries. It has the battery, it has the antennas, and it has the E8 transmitter, but again, this one's a little bit different because this has ELRS built into it, and so does the TinyHawk 3. So ELRS is a new protocol. In the past, EMAX used a different protocol. This is an updated version. It's supposed to have longer range, lower latency, all that kind of stuff so that you can get out and fly and have a little more confidence that you're not going to get interference or anything like that while your transmitter is working. Now, this transmitter looks very similar to the previous ones. It has an internal battery, and actually the battery life on this thing is pretty good. We've had it for a couple of weeks now, and I think we've only charged it once, and it's still flying just fine. Has all the usual switches, but it's a cheaper transmitter. The gimbals are okay, but they're not great. But for somebody who's just starting out or just wants to fly indoors with a tiny whoop and wants an ELRS transmitter, this is a pretty good way to go. Now, the one thing that we've had some problems with is on the goggles themselves, there is a built-in battery, and that battery life is really around 30 minutes. You're gonna not only get about 30 minutes of flight time, which doesn't seem like quite enough to me, but also it doesn't really warn you when it's gonna stop. It literally just shuts down, the screen goes blank whenever it dies. So if you are flying this thing and you're on battery number 5 or 6 and you've got 3 to 5 minutes of flight time, depending on which quad you're flying with it, you might very well lose it after 5 or 6 flights at 5 minutes per flight because this battery life in this thing is not fantastic. Oh, goggle's dead. So we're sitting here at this park bench trying to make the TinyHawk skid across it and film it in slow-mo. But while we're doing that, all of a sudden the goggles go black because the battery just dies and there's no warning. So EMAX, I really hope you can include something like a software update that will allow these to get a warning and give you a little beep or a little flash or something before they just go dead, because had I been flying way over there or over the water, the drone would have gone in the water. One way to get around that is you can plug a USB power supply into it, like a little power brick, so you're constantly giving it power as you're flying. That would be one way if you're concerned, if you're gonna be flying multiple packs. But what you don't want to have happen is have it just go out on you mid-flight and all of a sudden you can't see. And that has happened to us a couple of times. Fortunately, we've been indoors or close by with the TinyHawk, so it hasn't been an issue of losing the TinyHawk. Now, speaking of the quad itself, It is a very similar design to the other TinyHawks. It's got the ducted props. It does come with 2 full sets of props, which is awesome. It does already have an ELRS module built into it, which is great. It does use USB-C, which is really fantastic right here for the flight controller. So you can plug in via USB-C, which means that you can use any USB-C cable. You don't have to use those old micro USBs, which I love. The battery connects to the bottom with these 2 little rubber bands, and it's a 1S battery that plugs into the bottom. Gives it about 3 to 4 minutes of flight time on this guy. The one thing that we had some trouble with was the camera tilt. Now the camera tilt does have a screw on either side that you can tighten, but even when it's tightened, if you hit the ceiling or you crash, the tilt gets out of whack and it just doesn't stay very well. And these screws, even when you tighten them down, they don't really stay tight. So after you move it a couple times, like I'm doing right now, it gets looser and looser, and by the end, it's super easy to move. And so it doesn't stay in the tilt that you want it to if you're banging into things. Now, if you just put it in the tilt, you don't crash and you fly kind of calmly, it'll stay where you want it to, but as soon as you crash or hit the ceiling, it's gonna probably knock it up or down or something like that. So just know that these screws don't really hold it very well and that you have to kind of adjust the camera tilt each time. Because keep in mind, you don't want it facing straight ahead because this thing tilts when it flies. You know, the way it goes to the right is it tilts to the right. The way it goes left, it tilts left. To go forward, it tilts forward. And so tilting forward, you actually want the camera angle to be up a little bit. So if you're flying fast like this, where it's tilted way forward, you want that camera sticking way up like this. If you're flying a little slower, your angle can be a little less because your tilt's a little less on the drone itself. But overall, that's a small complaint. It's just one of these things where I wish they would figure out a way to make this thing stay a little better without having to tighten these screws again and again. Now, in terms of fun to fly, it's really fun to fly. All these TinyHawks have always been really fun to fly, and with the ELRS and the HD0 built into it, you're gonna get better performance, you're gonna get better video, so you can see gaps better, you can see obstacles better. It's just gonna be a little bit easier to fly from being able to see in a visibility perspective. However, honestly, this thing is a little bit underpowered. If you are used to something that's really zippy, like a freestyle quad with a better power to weight ratio, this thing's gonna feel pretty sluggish. But I really think this is designed more for indoor flying if you're experienced, and a lot of times you're flying just in angle or horizon mode, which means it's stabilizing itself for you because you're flying indoors, and it's pretty hard to fly acro indoors unless you're trying to go really fast. But if you're just exploring, going through chairs, through ladders, you know, up and above gaps and stuff like that, flying this thing in angle mode is really the way to go. But just keep in mind, it's not going to be super responsive because A, it's in angle mode, and B, it's just not got a lot of power in terms of how much it responds when you take off. Even just pulling out of a little bit of a dive, or if you are taking off, you have to give it quite a bit of power in order to get off the ground. Now that lack of power may be because of the way it's tuned out of the box. So if you don't adjust anything, and we didn't adjust anything, we just flew it as it was out of the box, it's gonna be a little slow and sluggish, but that might be better if you're a beginner or you're just getting into FPV, or again, you just wanna fly it around slowly in your house and explore. Go into beta flight if you wanna change those settings and see if you can get a little more zip on it. That might not be a bad thing to do, but out of the box, it's gonna be fairly docile and fairly easy for a new FPV pilot to fly. Now we flew this outdoors quite a bit. We actually took it with us to San Diego and flew it around a little bit near the beach and in some different places where there was a decent amount of breeze and wind, and it definitely had to fight that breeze a lot. If there's any sort of wind, it's gonna be caught in that because it's not very powerful and it's got a lot of surface area with these ducts and everything. It's kind of heavy for its size. But if you're flying it indoors, you're not gonna have any problem because that wind's not gonna be a factor flying it around inside. It really is designed to fly inside or in a courtyard or someplace out of the wind, out of the breeze, and fairly close to where you are. Now, the fun part is you can go through some really tiny, tiny gaps because it is called a TinyHawk, and that's sort of the point of it. You can go through gaps that you wouldn't try with a freestyle quad. You can go through gaps that you wouldn't try with a quad that's not ducted, and it just bounces off. If you hit something, no problem. I even took off and kind of hit myself and was able to just kill the throttle and take back off again. That wouldn't have been the case if this was a quad without ducted props. I love TinyHawks, and this one doesn't disappoint. It is really fun to fly. Just know that it's not gonna be as powerful as other quads, but if you're a beginner and you don't have any point of reference, this is really a great thing to try to learn on because it gives you that all-in-one kit from the transmitter to the receiver that's built in, to the goggles, and everything just works when you turn it on. You're gonna wanna buy a lot of extra batteries. It does come with 2 sets of props, which is really nice. And it does come with this case, which is also really nice, something that you can put it into and have it all in one place, easy to travel with. And it comes with some little tools and things like that. It does have a configuration where you can actually take this screen off of the goggles and attach it to the controller, something like this, and fly it that way if you prefer. But really, doing that is interesting and you can allow other people to watch, but you don't get that immersive experience as you get wearing the goggles. So it wouldn't be my first choice. So if you do record in the DVR built into this thing, it's gonna either give you MOV or TS files. We use TS files because they were more reliable, but again, keep in mind that it's not something you can usually open up and just play immediately. You have to have something like VLC installed on your computer to be able to play those TS files back. But then once you convert them or just put them natively into an editing program and export it as an MP4, then you're fine. But overall, the brightness on this thing is pretty good. The display is decent. It's a good looking little monitor. And I love the magnetic part of it. I love how it just sticks right into the goggles themselves. So there is the quad, and it's already scanned for the transmission from the quad, so we should get it here in a second. Yep, it's looking for it. Oh, and you know, if it's too close to it, it actually will overpower the receiver, and you'll get kind of a little bit of distortion like that and crackle. But when you're set it about 3 feet away, and then it's just fine. So there's our view on the actual screen. And then once again, when you plug this into the goggles and you're looking through the lens in this goggle set, it actually is, you know, looks very big and immersive to your eyes. It's not a bad experience. These aren't the most comfortable goggles, and they do have a little bit of light leak, but they're far a step ahead of the regular analog goggles that used to come with TinyHawks. So a couple things about the radio. Pretty much standard on most radios setups are if you push the sticks away from you, so that means up or back and away, that is usually the safest position, meaning that will cut your motors and that will put it into angle mode. And that way, you know, if you get into trouble, push the sticks away from you and the motors will cut. Or if you're in air mode or acro mode and you want to go to angle, you just push the whatever stick that is away. Now I believe the arm switch is here. Yep, that's it. It's this top left as you're looking at it, arms it. And I believe this is the turtle mode or flip over after crash switch, which I'll show you in a second. This one here is going to be your beeper, and then this is going to be your rates. So this is going to get you into angle, which is the easiest if it's pushed up and away from you. Middle's going to be horizon mode, which is going to be the middle mode. It's still pretty easy, but you can do flips and stuff. And then the bottom will be acro mode. Let's try the turtle mode. There we go. So there's turtle mode. But as you can see, it's struggling to flip over. Again, I think that is a power to weight ratio thing. It doesn't have a great power to weight ratio, and so it's heavy and it's having a hard time flipping it back over, even when it's in turtle mode. I do think, like most quads, it's a good idea when you plug it in to have it sitting on a flat surface for a few seconds so it can calibrate everything so it knows which way is up. This is arm. So right now I'm in angle mode, which is just a basic stabilized flight. It's pretty easy to fly in angle mode, and it's great for little gaps like that. And then if you flip it one time, flip this switch, you're going to go into horizon mode, which I think will allow you to flip. Will it?
Yes.
But again, a little underpowered, so, and the rate doesn't flip very fast, so even though I flipped it, it bounced off the floor because I couldn't recover. And then of course, if you pull this stick all the way towards you, you go into acro and you go all over the place. It's crazy. I'm upside down. Let's see if turtle mode works. Hashtag turtle fail. So overall, I'm pretty biased because I do like the TinyHawks. I've always liked the TinyHawks, so I like this one. I wish it had a little more power. I wish the camera would stay in place a little better, and I wish the goggles would give you some warning before they shut off. But other than those three things, if you're looking for just a very easy to set up and start flying FPV kind of quad indoors and not having to worry about regulations or remote ID or any of that stuff because you're mostly flying indoors anyway where none of those things apply, the TinyHawk's a great option. And the HD0 certainly improves the visibility and the clarity of the image that you get versus analog, which is what this used to have. You're not gonna do anything cinematic with this. You're probably not gonna do any crazy FPV freestyle with it, although we haven't really tried changing the rates, so in fairness, maybe you can if you change the rates, but I just think the power to weight ratio on this is too low for that. But just for goofing around, flying around indoors, learning how to fly FPV, learning how to hit gaps, pestering your children and your wife and your dog and any other people that live in the same house as you, it's great for that. It's a hashtag Pester drone. So really, if you're looking to do something just flying around indoors and having some fun while you pester your family, this is great. It's really great for beginners. But if you want something that has more power, that goes faster, that can fight the wind and is better for outdoors, this isn't the quad for you. However, we do have another video about another EMAX quad that's coming out right around the same time, and we'll leave a link to it somewhere up in the screen. You can check that out. It's called the Freestyle, and it is designed just for that. So let me know what you think. Leave a comment below, hashtag yeah, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching Ready, Set, Drone.
Goodness. You okay?
Yeah. Yeah.